Good evening, everybody. I am Trillian Atwood, the Director of Programs and Visitor Experience here at the Jewish Museum of Maryland. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's presentation, Are We Alone and Does It Matter? Jewish Perspectives on Extraterrestrial Life, with Rabbi Dr. Eli Yogev. So as some of you may know, this Monday marks the 51st anniversary of the moon landing. We had, of course, hoped to mark the anniversary on site with our Jews in Space exhibit, originally scheduled to have opened in May. The current situation, of course, has delayed that opening until September. However, we are still marking the anniversary with a series of events, of which this evening is the second. For those of you with a passion for all things space, please join us again next week at the same time when we welcome back the Rabbi for his next presentation in the series, How to be Jewish in Space. It's sure to be an excellent presentation. We'll put the link for that event to register in the chat box at the close of the program, so you can register your spot today. So now to our speaker. Rabbi Dr. Eli Yogev, Associate Rabbi at Beth Tefillah Congregation, lectures widely on topics in Jewish thought and spirituality. Over the past year, his talks have included titles such as Angels and Demons in Jewish Tradition and Is There an Afterlife? Rabbi Yogev completed his doctoral dissertation at Bar Ilan University in Jewish mysticism and Hasidism. In his free time, Rabbi Yogev enjoys beatboxing, photography, meditation, and anything to do with animals. So please welcome Rabbi Yogev to our virtual JMM. Thank you. Over to you, Rabbi.
All right, thanks, Trillian. Hi, everyone. It's kind of weird. I can't see everyone, but you can see me. Maybe that's fitting for this topic of aliens. People, beings that see us, we don't see them, or maybe we will. We'll go into that today. So I'm just so happy you're here. We have 2 fun weeks planned. This week we're going to be talking about just the concept of alien life, what Jewish texts had to say about it over the generations, what I have to say about it. I have like a contribution to this discussion. We're going to scan around 6 approaches, and it should be really enlightening. And I believe there's a deep message too that we can take from it. Next week, we're going to talk about how to be Jewish in outer space. It's a really interesting topic, actually. Let's say you're going to outer space and you're in orbit and you see a sunset and a sunrise every 90 minutes. What do? Do you pray 3 times every 90 minutes as an observant Jew? Do you guard the Sabbath every 6 intervals of 90 minutes? So that's like one of the questions, but there are many questions, and some of them are real. They were asked by Ilan Ramon when he before he took off in outer space. He asked some rabbis these questions. So these can be practical questions too. I believe there too there's some really important takeaways for our lives. So we have some good things ahead of us. I'm a rabbi at Beth Tefillah Congregation. I'm interested in these kind of topics, in addition to more normative Jewish things. But I'm drawn a little bit to the mystical aspects and the extraterrestrial. So finally, I found a platform who would allow me to teach this stuff. So I'm excited that we can do this. Okay, so near the end of the lecture, we're going to be linking to a source sheet that I created with all the text that I'm going to be mentioning. I'm just bringing excerpts. I'm going to be working with a PowerPoint presentation, just excerpts from the source sheet. But you can have the full sources and the references that we're going to send that to you in the chat bar. And in addition, there's a bibliography there with some of the sources that I'm going to be using. So I'm just going to show you in like literally 10 seconds some of the sources that I use for this. This is a nice text. People don't know about this. Aliens, Angels, and Demons by Ariel Bar Tzadok. This is a good book. He has some good information on this. And another seminal, the seminal article by Ari Kaplan appears in this book, the Ari Kaplan Reader. And it's 4 pages, but he goes through 3 approaches there. So you can see the bibliography. There'll be more there that you can take a look at. Okay, so let's without further ado, let's get going and let's figure out if there's such thing as aliens on other planets, or maybe on our planet. All right, so let me share my screen with you. One moment. Okay. Here we go. Wonderful. So this is our topic here. Are we alone and does it matter? Jewish responses to life on other planets. So there's two pieces here. Are we alone? That's the textual discussion. And does it matter? That's the takeaway. And our slide shows separate into several parts. It's just the intro. And I brought a text here from Rav Aryeh Kaplan, who wrote that seminal article I mentioned. He says, he brings this from the Talmud. In the world to come after the resurrection, we will be traveling to the stars in order that each and every righteous person will rule over his own planet. So already here, there's some discussion of connection to outer space and the idea that in the future, we'll be going to other planets. So what about now? And what about in the past? So that's what we're going to discuss at this point. So before we get started, I wanted to take a poll, and it's a basic poll, very simple. Either on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, or if you are on Zoom with us. If you're open to doing this, answer Y or N to this question. Do you believe in the existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life? Yes is Y, obviously, and N is no. And I'm going to ask once some of the results are in. I know it's a kind of like I'm not giving you an option maybe. I'm not giving you really an option to like for nuance, but it makes it interesting. So let's see what some of your answers are. I'm going to ask Trillian to share what she sees from the responses.
Yeah, so far the response overwhelmingly is yes. We've had a few no's, one maybe, and otherwise it is all yeses coming in on this one.
Okay. So also, this question could have been asked differently. Do you believe in the possibility of the existence? But here it's like more definite. Any other still yeses?
Still yeses. One, I think, yes, definitely, with a tiny typo.
Okay.
But yeah, still mainly yeses that we're getting from everyone. And I think we've had, it looks like almost everyone's responded. So thank you very much for that, everybody, for jumping on that so quickly.
Awesome. So we'll do that. We'll stay in connection as we go along a little bit. I'll ask you a question or two as we go along. You can tap it in the chat bar. Also, if you have questions, if you have thoughts or questions, feel free to type them into the chat bar as we go along. All right. So you're not alone. Those who answered yes, you're in good company. This is a poll from 2015. The question was asked, do you believe that there's extraterrestrial intelligent life? The U.S., only 24% say they don't believe. 22% say they don't know. 54% say they do believe. So the question is, what does this mean? Are they like us or not like us? Is it because we actually believe that there's aliens who are UFOs, or do we believe that it could be some sort of form of life that's not similar to ours? Or we believe in probability. There's a good probability that's out there. There are many different ways to go with this, but I don't know about you, but I was surprised when I saw this poll and the results here, because I didn't believe that Americans believed, or anywhere, all over these different areas, believe that the majority believe that there is extraterrestrial intelligent life. So that's interesting. So here's just on our introduction. This is part of a larger lecture. We're kind of limited in time. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I once watched this whole 2-hour long video of a woman depicting all kinds of encounters that she heard about from people, and people were asked to write about those encounters. And some of these pictures on the left side of the screen, they're pictures that people, like drawings based on people's depictions of their alien encounters. So what's interesting is, and on the right side I just looked up, I Googled like the top 12 movies with aliens, grossing movies, and that's what came up. So we learn about aliens a lot of times from movies, or perhaps from our own imagination, or how we understand ourselves. And a lot of times these depictions of aliens that we see kind of look like human beings, which is interesting. Not all the time. Like if you look in the left corner, that doesn't look like a human being, or it has some features like a human being. But it's just interesting that a lot of depictions I heard about in that 2-hour video, most depictions were similar to human form. And that's going to be a central piece in this discussion. How much, or if we do believe in aliens, how much are they similar to humans or not? And what does that mean for us? And that brings me to this next slide. I don't know if you take a look at some of these pictures. Anybody, if you want to put in the chat bar what your favorite alien movie is, feel free to do so. At the end, I'll have someone tell me which one was the most popular. Okay, so does it matter? So does it matter? Well, it might matter. Not just in terms of aliens taking over the world, like it says, like on this slide. There's in the two middle pictures here, the middle column, are two reasons why aliens might visit the world. Maybe they want to understand us. They want to scan our minds, or maybe they want to inculcate us with some sort of message. You see these themes a lot of times in movies. But aside from our fear of them taking over the world, taking over us, does it matter? So that's what I'm going to discuss here. And this is philosophically, or at least in terms of our internal world and our inner space. One approach, if you take a look on the left side, this is a classic diagram which depicts humans on the top of the, just trying to make sure I have on the top of the time here. I want to keep within the time frame. Trillian, maybe you can give me a heads up when we're like 10 minutes before the end, so I can kind of know where I am. Okay, so it depicts humans as having all the ability to grow, ability to move, ability to think rationally. So therefore, humans are on the top of the pyramid. And they're the most advanced life form. So let's say we discover an alien or an extraterrestrial being who has another box that we don't even know about. They can think, they have free will, they're more advanced. Perhaps we as humans, this would affect how we view ourselves, because many times people will view the human race as the pinnacle of creation. You see this a lot in Jewish thought. The whole world was created for humans. And we're going to talk about that. And so this might affect humanity's view of themselves, maybe for the worst, maybe for the best. I don't know. And now what does it mean for religious Jews also? For the Jews believe that God chose them to gave them the Torah. And oftentimes you'll see in text that God chose the Jews for certain reasons, maybe because they have a certain Jewish soul or something like that. And what if there are beings that are more advanced on every level than human beings and Jews on other planets? And there's a whole world there, and the Torah doesn't discuss it. Torah doesn't discuss it explicitly. That's one issue, that the Torah doesn't discuss it, but there's a whole world that God's taking care of we don't even know about. So maybe that would question the Torah's validity. But in addition, let's say there's Jews on other planets. They have wigs, and they have black hats and payas, and I'm just giving you an example. But let's say some people call those individuals aliens, but we're not saying that. I'm saying there's aliens that look like Jews on other planets, and they're more advanced than Jews. Why? What makes us chosen anymore as Jewish people? If however you define chosenness, those are some questions that arise from this whole discussion, and that's why it does matter. And that's why there were articles written on this, a really important articles written by Rabbi Lamb of blessed memory, who's recently passed away. There an important article that I linked to on the source sheet, The Religious Implications of Extraterrestrial Life. We're going to be referencing that here too. So without further ado, let's move on to our first stage. This is, are there any questions, Trillian, at this point that are like really relevant for where we're going?
No, I think you're good for the moment. We can come back to the couple that we've got.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the first set of the first group here. This is mystical and mythical texts. Okay, so in this group there are two texts that affirm extraterrestrial life based on two mystical approaches. Okay, so what's unique about this group, the three groups we're going to be talking about is mystical texts, philosophical texts and modern texts. Okay, in the modern category, Rabbi Sachs, I'm bringing him, and also my own approach to it, and Rabbi Hirsch too, Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch. So in the mystical text, I'm only bringing those who affirm two streams of mystical texts that affirm life on other planets. Let me, okay. So this first source goes into the biblical sons of God. Okay, and this is the first direction. And I put an arrow here going up then down. This is because this is from Genesis 6. And I'll just stop sharing for a moment just to share the background of this. So the background behind the story is that according to these mystical texts, when God created humans, there were angels who were were kind of critiquing how Adam sinned and said, if we were created and put in the world, we wouldn't sin like Adam did. And so God said, oh, really? Let me put you to the test. So he sent down those angels, and those angels ended up, they're called B'nai Elohim. Actually, B'nai Elohim, we have to call them in this context. They were sons of God. God sent down angels, and those angels ended up sinning and engaging in sexual encounters with women on earth. And according to this explanation, those B'nai Elohim, which are considered children of God, and based on mysticism, those are like divine angels. They intermingled their DNA with those women, and through them were born extraterrestrial beings on Earth, according to this account. Now, you can understand those B'nai Elohim in another way, and many commentators explain it that way, and then you don't have extraterrestrial beings at all. But according to this tradition, this is a source for extraterrestrial beings in this world. And again, if you ask me, Rabbi Yogev, can I prove? If you say, Rabbi Yogev, prove this to me that this is true, I can't prove it to you. All I'm doing at this point, the next stage, when we're talking about philosophical text, we can engage more of our intellect and try to analyze if we think it's true or not. At this point, I'm presenting you two traditions from Jewish mysticism that affirm extraterrestrial beings, but they're almost axiomatic, and I can't prove them. But nevertheless, they're good to know about. So here's the text. It says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. I'm reading verse 4. And when the sons of God will come to the daughters of man. So the sons of God, who are what we're talking about, these angels, they came and they cohabitated with the daughters of man, which are women, human women. And through them, the Nephilim were born. Nephilim, according to this interpretation, is fallen angels. And all this havoc, it caused all this havoc in the world. And it's said, according to tradition, that this is one of the reasons why God brought the flood, according to that mystical tradition, that God brought the flood. God brought the flood in order to remove this like bad DNA from the world, because a lot of mischief came from that. So that's kind of like that one mystical stream. And it says in Rav Aryeh Bar Tzadok says this. He says says here, they became entrapped here, bore their fate, and started families, mingling their genetics with human genetics. This polluted the human gene pool, as we know. The flood soon followed. So that's one version. That's from up above, below. It came down from heaven, below. Now there's another model, which is from inside out, and that's the middle hollow Earth theory. Now, if anybody knows about this theory, maybe you could just let us know in the chat section. This is I just Googled it because that's what I do. I don't know the answers to anything, so I Googled it, and there's a lot of this is like a philosophy that's been around for a long time, and many people debunked it, etc. But it's interesting when I was looking through sources, Jewish sources on this, rabbis in our generation uphold, some who accept mystical traditions, uphold this philosophy, and the philosophy basically says that. I'll just read you a little bit on this. This is that there's an inner earth within the earth, and mystical texts uphold this and say that That's where all these humanoids are. And it says, and this is from the Zohar, this is from other mystical texts. They uphold this philosophy. And I'll just read you. It says, Rav Abram Azulai states that there's 365 different species of creatures in inner earth, which are half human, half animal, similar to the ancient centaur. And some say that this is where the Nephilim are. So all that, they kind of like collapse the first stream into the second stream. Any case, this theory basically is another theory that I can't prove to you. I just wanted to present it to you. And I saw something interesting which helps me as someone who's more of an academic, which I saw one rabbi hint to the fact that maybe this isn't literal, maybe this is figurative. And maybe this is the idea, like that some of these forces, these alien forces that we might come across, they could be understood as shadim, which is like kind of demons, and that they come from the inner parts of the earth, the dark parts of the earth. So maybe it's not completely literal if you accept those who debunk this whole philosophy. But nevertheless, this appears throughout our texts, and I'll just read you one more quote here. There are many races of indigenous, intelligent, sentient entities living in inner earth. Rav Aryeh Bar Tzadok, he accepts these. He's like a contemporary rabbi. He accepts this as true. Many of these species know about us, and many of them have interacted with us for a very long time. Some of these races are benign and benevolent. Others, on the other hand, are nothing but trouble. Don't be scared. So if you ever, when you're a kid and you're afraid of aliens or monsters in your closet, they could have been coming from inner earth. Who knows? I'm actually making a joke, but this is some people take this approach very seriously, and a lot of these texts do uphold this philosophy. So I wanted to present to you those two approaches: one from above, one from inside, and those are two mystical texts. Now I want to transition to philosophical texts, and there are three of them. And this discussion is going to be very different. This discussion is going to be more like engaging logic. Now, if you have mystical texts, you're good. Whenever someone asks me a question and I don't always know the answer, I'll just say, it's written in the Kabbalah. It's a mystical approach. I don't always say that. Usually I'll say that if I know that actually it is written in mysticism. But when you say that, you basically don't always have that much of a say in it. It's basically you accept it as some sort of mystical tradition or some sort of spiritual reality. But philosophers in the Middle Ages who didn't have mystical traditions, or didn't at least work with them as axioms, they interestingly were asking themselves, is there life on other planets? They were asking these questions. They didn't have these mystical texts of the hollow earth or the fallen angels to go by. So they had to start thinking, is there life on other planets or not? And they had to start using their logic to get to an answer when it comes to this. And they also engaged some traditional texts in this discussion. So I want to present that to you. Before I do so, Trillian, is there anybody, any pieces there that we should address before I move on?
There's possibly one question that might be worth answering right now. Somebody's asked about, so you noted mystical sources that are pro-extraterrestrial life, but are there mystical sources that are directly against extraterrestrial life, or are all mystical sources generally in favor or neutral towards the idea?
That is such a great question. I haven't been through all the mystical texts. I've been through a somewhat good amount, but I can't say offhand if there are those who are against it. I'd have to look into that more. Oftentimes, it's just not discussed. Like the Torah is the five books of Moses. Is it against aliens? Doesn't talk about it. So if you read it, the simple reading of it. So a lot of texts just don't discuss it. There's a lot of discussions of like angels and demons, and sometimes the discussion gets kind of blurred between the two. But the mystics, for the most part, accept those as beings, real beings, and even sometimes clothed in bodies. So I think it leans towards that direction. I'd be happy to see texts that deny it within mystical texts, but I don't have any offhand right now. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah. All right. So I want to move on to three rational approaches, okay? And this discussion gets really interesting. I'll tell you why. Because when you deal with it rationally, you start to think, could there be life on other planets? And you'll see like the medieval logic at play as they're trying to analyze it. And in addition, they deal with the issue that we mentioned in the very beginning. If humans, if you accept this idea that humans are at the pinnacle or the center of, if you accept that humans are in the pinnacle or the center of reality, then what do you make? If you deduce through your intellect that aliens exist, what do you make of that? Like, how do you view yourself afterwards? And that's kind of like what they're grappling with. You'll see in each of these texts. So it's like a really fun exercise. I didn't bring all of the back and forth. You'll see that a lot of it in your source sheet that we'll link to near the end of the lecture, and also hopefully we can put it on Facebook Live if that's possible. But what my contribution to my source sheet also is that I translated some of an important source, Sefer Brit. I translated to English there, so you can have some of that. But so I want to show you. Let's start with the first approach here. Okay, philosophical text. So yes, no, maybe. There are three approaches that I'm going to present to you, and guess what? One says yes, one says no, one says maybe. So let's see what they are. All right, the first text, and this is Rav Chizdai Kraskas. I just think this is beautiful that we have. He's working with logic, and he's basically in his book, in his philosophical book, treatise. He goes into this topic, and this is Or Hashem, and he just asks the question. He's basically like, hey, could another world or many worlds exist? Simply meaning other worlds similar to our world exist. And he says there are arguments for each side. Okay, so I just brought you the conclusion here, but I just want to go through a little bit of his process, which is like fascinating. So he says he brings proofs to say, based on logic, that there could be other worlds similar to our worlds. Again, he doesn't have the mystical tradition to rely on. So he's using his logic. Brings arguments to say that perhaps there don't exist other worlds similar to other worlds. So I'll bring you one or two from each one. He says, so the first argument to say that there might be life on other planets from logic, he says, well, so he says God wants to do good. If this world's good, a lot of us think it is. Maybe some people are doubting that nowadays, but we're in a good world, let's say. So if God's the ultimate good, why would God be stingy? So God could create other worlds, and nothing's holding God back. That's like one of his arguments. One of his arguments against this, he says, and this is in the source sheet, he says, the world, so he has this idea that multiplicity, it's based on logic, multiplicity exists only in entities that will eventually deteriorate. That was his belief, or a belief that was prevalent, at least maybe in a circle or whatever. So if he believed that the world, our Earth, is eternal, will continue to exist forever. So there can't be another one, because you only need a multiplicity of items if you're afraid that one item, that one entity is going to deteriorate. But the world's not going to deteriorate, according to his understanding. So we don't need a multiplicity of worlds, and there's no need for it, so it doesn't exist. Again, you could debunk that. You could debunk each one of these. That's why it's like a whole logical back and forth that I won't overdo. I won't overburden you with right now. And he has other arguments which are interesting. But at a certain point, he gets to this stage. Again, you could debunk his last one just saying the world's not eternal, But and he gets to a certain point where he just says like this: I've gone back and forth, where ways to say pros and cons. In the end, he gets to this point where, since it is true that I'm reading the slide right now. Since it is true that none of the reasons we have presented, positive or negative, are sufficient grounds to determine the truth, and they provide only a possibility, etc., etc. He says, it is appropriate that we not distance the lesson of some of our sages from the passage in Avodah Zarah, which is a tractate in Talmud. It teaches that God travels among 18,000 worlds. which means, according to Rav Chesdei Kraskas, that God travels, God's supervision travels among inhabited worlds. Now, that's his source, and I brought it in the yellow box here, that the source from the Talmud. I'm not going to go into how he got to 18,000, but there's like a way that they learn it out. But he says, because I don't have a way to prove it with my intellect, I'll rely on the sages that say God travels among 18,000 worlds. Now, you could say, Rabbi Yogev, the fact that it says God travels around 18,000 worlds, does that mean for sure that they're inhabited? And is it for sure literal and not figurative? I'll leave you to judge that. But that's the first approach. He basically says maybe it could be, and because it's maybe, I'll bring a text of support for it from the Talmud. The second approach, which says no, is his student. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef Albo, Rav Chesdei Kraskas, the student. This is an excerpt from Rabbi Kaplan's article, and I'm just going to read it to you. The exact opposite opinion is that of Rabbi Yosef Albo, author of the Ikarim. So he's again using his intellect. He says, since the universe is created for the sake of man, no other creature can exist possessing free will. So there's an assumption. All of reality was created for humans. So if that's the case, we have to be the most pristine, the highest level creatures. And if that's the case, no other creature can be like us. And what makes us unique is that we have free will. So there can't be another creature like us in all the universe because everything was created for us. If that's the case and they can't be like us, there's no point for aliens because they're obviously not serving us. They're in other galaxies. If they're not serving us or they're not here for humans, then there's no point in them being here and they don't exist. That's basically his approach. I know it's like, there's a few assumptions there, but I'll just break it down to you really quickly. He's basically saying humans are at the center of everything and we have free will that makes us unique. Due to that, there's no other creatures like us. And if there's no other creatures like us, the only reason they be worthy of existing is that they be in service of us. Now, I could see maybe horses or cows being in service of humans, but aliens, they're not in service of us. We don't see them, at least we don't see them. So if that's the case, they can't exist. And that was his approach. Again, this is all using one's intellect and trying to figure out if they exist or not. So these are really four approaches so far. We have the two mystical ones, two philosophical ones. It was maybe, no. Now, this approach is pretty awesome. This is Pinchas Eliyahu. He's from Vilna, and he's a little bit of a later authority. And he just opens up his text and basically says, he's from 1765, from the 18th century, early 19th century. And he just goes into this. First of all, this book is pretty awesome. It's like encyclopedia of science and mysticism. It's amazing work. And he just says, maybe because he's more mystically inclined. Important to know. Without a doubt, and this is the source that, like, if you want to quote a source that's very clear and very sure, very confident of this. This is the source to quote. This is you'll see on your source sheet. I bring more of the text there. Without a doubt, okay, I have some doubts, but he doesn't have a doubt. Without a doubt, the worlds were not created for naught, but rather to be settled. The yesh bahem brewing. Bam. They contain extraterrestrial life. And then he goes on to kind of go, he goes this whole interesting back and forth. And I'll just give you like that in like 1 minute. He goes interesting back and forth where he says, all of them were only created for the sake of human perfection in this world. So you say, that's interesting. They were created for human perfection in this world. Well, I don't see them helping us. He goes, listen, we don't know. He says, we can't comprehend the benefit we receive from these creatures. Listen, they could be praying for us on Mars, or they could be in some far-off galaxy sending us good energy. Who knows what their purpose is? But maybe they exist, and maybe they're they're here to serve us or to help humans. So he's still accepting this axiom that things in this world should be here to benefit humans. And based on that, he's answering the question saying, maybe they do benefit us. We just don't know how. I thought that was really interesting. And then he says, he brings a proof where he says that in Jewish mysticism, we know about multiple worlds. There's this whole idea of multiple worlds in Jewish mysticism. I wrote about that in my doctoral thesis. So there could be multiple worlds. In terms of alien life too. And so that's kind of like his approach, his like support from Jewish mysticism. Then he brings a support, which is one of the better supports, and he brings it from this source in Judges 5:23. It says, "Cursed is Meroz, cursed are its inhabitants." And if you listen to a lecture on aliens in Judaism, they will always bring this verse. So it's a nice verse because there's a source in the Talmud. It's on the very bottom of the source sheet here of this slide, where it says this place called Meroz. This concept of Meroz was cursed in Deborah's song, and the question is, why is it being cursed? The Talmud, one opinion says it was a human. Another opinion says in the Talmud that it was not a human, but it was a planet, a star. And he was cursing the star because this planet should have blessed them and helped them, but it didn't, so it was being cursed. Now, what's important for us is that it's cursed, and cursed are its inhabitants. Cursed are its inhabitants. So we see, if we accept the Talmud's approach that it's a star, that it's a planet, and its inhabitants, it has inhabitants, they might be cursed, but whatever. But it has inhabitants, so we see there's a planet with inhabitants. So there's a few stages here, but he brings us as support, and if you accept that approach in the Talmud that says it's a planet, and then there maybe is good support to say there's inhabitants in that planet. So that's kind of like the strongest source, I think, for this. And I see some comments in the chat section. Before we move on to the next and final stage, which we'll do like in 7 minutes or so we can have time for questions and answers. We're gonna have like a hard stop around 8 o'clock, so I have to go over to this cooking class in a moment at 8 o'clock. But in the meanwhile, are there any comments, Trillian?
There's definitely a few comments. I think one in particular that's coming through the Q&A that's probably worth touching upon now. So in referencing the different approaches you were just talking about then, does the second approach assume we will never visit those other worlds, even if humans are unique and the pinnacle of creation couldn't, space horses, be in service of humans in the event we could one day visit them?
Yeah, so you don't agree with that second approach. You don't agree with the second approach, but you're saying like, it could be that they might not be in service, they could potentially be in service of us, or be able to benefit us in some way or another. You don't agree with it, and others don't either. So yeah, and so I'm going to show you in a moment this whole other approach. That's what I want to present to you now. And this is brought in this article, which is really worth checking out. It's one of my rabbis, one of the rabbis that I hold in high regard, and a lot of people do. This is The Religious Implications of Extraterrestrial Life by Norman Lamb, and it's on the bibliography. And he basically debunks. He brings two approaches to the. I'll show you let me get not too far ahead of myself. He goes into this approach that everything was created for human beings. It's not so fast. Maybe there's approaches in Jewish tradition that not everything was created for human beings. And then you start to emerge from this whole problematic, this whole problem that was important to these medieval thinkers, and you can just talk on a whole different, you can solve some of the problems that they were dealing with. So what I want to do at this stage is I want to, going to turn to more modern texts addressing the issues. So there are basically three issues here. Number one is how do you deal with life on other planets if everything was supposed to be created for humans? That's number one. Number two, the second issue that's addressed that we've been dealing with is, I wanted to add one more thing actually. It's actually really important here. He says, Rav Eliyahu Horowitz, this before we get to this is really important. He says, without a doubt, there are not human creatures. There are non-human creatures located who are in our kind and our likeness. He says this with free will. They don't have free will, but it's possible they have intellect and wisdom. They do not have free will. So Eliyahu Horowitz, or Pinchas Eliyahu Horowitz, says they could be. There are creatures on other planets, but they don't have free will. They might have intellect, they might have wisdom, but they don't have free will. And this is important because that's the furthest I've seen rabbis go. And I want to go a step further. Okay, that's what I want to do in this stage. By addressing the issues. Again, the first issue that we're dealing with is life on other planets. What if they're there and they're not in service of humans? What would be their function? That's the first thing. Number two, if we discover aliens on other planets that are more advanced than us, and perhaps they have free will, would that affect how we view ourselves as humans or as Jews who have a concept of chosenness, however you understand that? And the last thing I'll just address, which is people ask all the time, like they don't want to believe in aliens because they're afraid the aliens might take over the world. So that's like, I'm just going to end with. That's like not the central piece of our discussion. So I want to present to you this approach that's brought in, this alternate approach that's brought in Rav Norman Lamm's article. And basically, this is the approach that not everything was created for humans. It's a shocker, I know. But this is Maimonides. And Maimonides might have, in his earlier days, thought differently in his introduction to the Mishnah. But here, in his Marnim Vuchim, in his Guide of the Perplexed, he says, in the yellow highlighted piece, the universe does not exist for man's sake, but that each being exists for its own sake, not because of some other thing. So I think this is one way to get out of the conundrum that bothered the medieval thinkers. We can have life on other planets, and they might not be in service of us. They might have their own purpose. I don't know what their purpose is. Maybe God's watching them, and they're on some sort of Zoom with their alien buddies talking about humans on Earth. Who knows? They might have their own world going. They don't have their own reality. They might exist for their own sake. And another source, which is very powerful, connected to this, is in relation to animals. I came across this in Richard Schwartz's book on vegetarianism and Judaism. Full disclosure, I'm a vegan, so I like these sources. Rav Hirsch says, and most people often say that animals were created for humans, and therefore they justify eating animals. But and there are the other reasons that are brought for this. But that's one justification. I'm not critiquing or saying. I'm just stating the facts. Rav Hirsch says, Rav Hirsch is a modern thinker. He says the earth and its creatures may have other relationships of which we are ignorant, in which they serve their own purpose. So it's not just in relation to all Maimonides. It's kind of a similar idea that Maimonides mentioned, but it's in relation to animals. Animals might have their own purpose, not just to serve humans, not just to be consumed by humans. They have their own purpose. So this helps us in accepting the reality. This is my goal here at this point, is to, in this last stage, is to make space for extraterrestrial beings, the belief in extraterrestrial beings. And one way to do it is just to say that they may exist for their own purpose. And I don't know why. Hashem, God, has a plan for them. And so these are two sources, Maimonides and Rav Hirsch, that discuss that. Now, I want to transition now to this next piece. And this is, with this piece, I'll conclude. The idea that the furthest we could get in Jewish thought, if Pinchas Horowitz, Pinchas Eliyahu Horowitz, he said that the furthest we could get is to say that they exist, aliens exist. They might be intelligent, but they won't have free will. My sense is what might have limited our thinkers in saying that is that what I mentioned in the very beginning of our lecture, that if we accept that they have free will, what makes us special anymore? I don't know if anybody saw, talking about Will, anybody saw Good Will Hunting, the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. There was this professor who was a genius, and he won prizes. And then this young man, Will, was even smarter than him, and it drove the professor crazy because he built his whole self-image on the fact that he was the genius professor, and he couldn't get over the fact that Will was able to solve the problems that took him so long to solve in a matter of no time. So why? I just saw someone post in the comment section, why is everyone firing at me? Good, because I was talking about Will, maybe. So this Will, so this might have bothered our rabbis over the generation, that us admitting that they might be advanced creatures because this would affect how we view ourselves as humans at the top of the pyramid, or as Jews who believe in chosenness. For this, I want to bring in Rabbi Jonathan Sachs as a model in his book Dignity of Difference, to help as a model to help us understand this. And it's basically the idea that you can be special. Okay, everybody here, you're special. All of us, everybody's special and unique, and I don't have to be special because I'm better than other people. I could be less advanced than other creatures. I could be ontologically, in terms of my essence, I could be on a lower level in certain ways. But that doesn't withhold me from arguing that I'm special, that I'm important, that I'm chosen by God. And so the model, and so that would be the same thing. That's why I believe we can go a step further even than the previous text, and saying they could have free will. They could even be more religious than I am, or you are, or whoever. They could be smarter than us. It could have everything. But it doesn't mean that we're not important as humans. It doesn't mean that we're not special as Jews. And that's kind of like the direction that Rabbi Sachs goes, and Rabbi Sachs goes in his article that I'm going to just share two excerpts with you. Share two excerpts from. There's basically, he says, this is from Jonathan Sachs' book. He talks not about Jews, not humans and aliens. He talks about Jews and non-Jews. And he has two versions of this book. The earlier version was extremely radically pluralistic, and there was huge pushback against it. And so I brought the more toned down version here. This is like the newer version, but the older version's out there, and there's an article online which kind of compares and contrasts them. But he basically says, I'll just read one piece here. God is my God, but also the God of all mankind, even those whose customs and way of life are unlike mine. And the second source, the yellow part, God is God of all humanity, but between Babel and the end of days, no single faith is the faith of all humanity. Such a narrative will lead us to respect the search for God in people of other faiths and reconcile the particularity of cultures with the universality of the human condition. There's more radical, very radical versions of this of this approach in his earlier text, where he says, "He is my God, but also your God. He is on my side, but also on your side. He exists not only in my faith, but also in yours." Again, he eventually rescinded these texts, but it's just an interesting approach where it's basically said, like, the Jews can uphold their chosenness and humans can uphold their specialness, but they can simultaneously accept that other people will be special and have a unique connection with Hashem too. And he has like one other text in his earlier form of this, and this is like crazy, and I understand why he got pushback for this. He says, in the course of history, God has spoken to mankind in many languages, through Judaism to Jews, Christianity to Christians, Islam to Muslims. So imagine this mainstream Orthodox rabbi saying that. That's why he got pushback, and he changed the language. But I'm just trying to show that this idea that you can believe in your own chosenness and have your own self-import amidst affirming other people's importance too. So again, I think through this we're able to address two main issues that are usually problematic for our thinkers. I think we can take it a step further. I, Rabbi Yogev, hereby accept that there could be, this could like turn into a meme or something. I hereby accept that there could be alien life form on other planets. I'm not as worried by the fact that that they might not be serving us, because they could have their own purpose. I'm not so worried that they might be more advanced than me. It doesn't affect how I view myself. And I know I have my unique connection with God. I know that even if you understand chosenness as unique history and connection with God, then you can affirm your chosenness and your specialness as humans, because everybody's special in their own unique way. Lastly, am I worried that the aliens are going to take over the earth? I'm not, because I'm a believing Jew and I believe God has a plan. And so I'm not worried about that for now, and hopefully not for the foreseeable future. Thanks for joining me.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. So as a very quick reminder, we've got a little bit of time here for some questions for the rabbi. Those of you who are joining us on Facebook, pop those questions into the comments section and we'll get them over to us. Those of you who are with us in Zoom, if you can pop those questions, ideally in the Q&A, but they can also go into the chat. That also works well for us. So I'm going to pull from one of the questions that we've got here already, and that goes back a little bit in the presentation. So if the mystics viewed the Nephilim as angel-like beings or extraterrestrials, what was the non-mystical view of that particular verse?
Yeah, so it's just that they were B'nai Elohim, that they were understood as humans. I had to recall exactly like why they were referenced as B'nai Elohim, but it was just humans cohabiting with like men cohabiting with women. It wasn't necessarily like B'nai, like the sons of God, like angels. So I know there's like a reason why that the name Elohim is used there, but I'm forgetting that now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, another question that we've got here is, can an alien become Jewish?
Okay, I'm happy you asked that because next week we're going to be addressing that. So this week, if you felt like I took you on a whirlwind of Jewish thought and mysticism this week, next week we're going to land the spaceship. We're going to be focused on very practical laws connected to aliens and humans, and how actually Jewish halacha, Jewish law, would apply in outer space, and what blessing would you make over eating an alien? I know that's kind of like a funny thing, but we'll talk about space food and a lot of Jewish questions connected to Jewish law, and actually really practical questions like I mentioned. Let's say an astronaut wants to go to outer space. How do they observe Judaism in outer space?
Fantastic. I think on that note, I'm actually going to drop right now into the chat section for everybody, both the link to register for next week and also the materials that the rabbi referenced that you can go and have a little look at as well. So I know one of the other questions that I saw here that I found interesting myself.
I just see someone mentioning the 18,000.
That was the one I was going to go for. Exactly that. So 18,000 sounds like a multiple of high. And by worlds in the 14th century, were they envisaging territory on this planet or other galaxies?
Yeah. This was they were envisioning that. They were envisioning this idea of inhabitants on other planets, the possibility of it. He doesn't say it for sure. He says we can rely, because we don't have like a sure proof to this. We can rely on this source that talks about inhabitants, other planets. So yeah. You're saying on other planets or on this planet or other galaxies? So if there's 18,000 worlds. Oh wait, so no. Okay, so yes. Sorry, I conflated the two texts. He did believe, he accepted the possibility that there could be life on these other planets. When he's talking about life, he's talking about other planets, he's talking about inhabited planets. So yes, inhabited 18,000 of them. They arrived at that because it says the chariots of God are myriads, which is 20,000. Even thousands shinan. So it says even thousands, which is 2,000s, she'enan, that are not. So it's 20,000 of minus 2,000s that are not. So it becomes 18,000. That's kind of the mathematics. But yes, that's cool that you pointed to the chai, the 18 behind that. Maybe there's some depth to that for sure. Chaim, chai, this life. That's good. I think someone chatted, well, that's a relief. I think they were saying that when I said, I don't think the world's going to be taken over soon by aliens.
I believe that is exactly when that one came up. Yep. Yeah, I think that actually gets us to most of our questions that we've got there. Oh, hold on, one more just popped up.
If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm just going to put my email here, and you can feel free to reach out to me. I have some of the documents in PDF form I can forward to you. That's my email in the chat section.
So just to wrap up then, as a reminder, you've got those links for registering for the next program and also to get some of those source materials in the chat box for you. We will be sending out a recording of the program this evening. So I know there is just a huge amount of information, and I can imagine some would like to go back and revisit as you're sort of processing. So no, that option is out there for you as well. And as a final reminder, as you leave the program this evening, a survey option will pop up. If you could please take a second to fill that in, it would be much appreciated. And I think with that, I would just like to say thank you so much, Rabbi Yoga. You've given us all a lot to think about, and it was absolutely fascinating. And hopefully we'll see everybody again in a week. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thanks for joining. Have a beautiful night.